Hi, my name is Steven and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be talking to you about giving advice, how to optimize your message. This channel is dedicated to providing valuable information about how to give advice to people. But giving advice is fraught with dangers if you don't know how to approach it correctly. Because giving advice is very nuanced. It can be both positive and negative in its consequence. It has the power to positively influence people for the better, and also the advice can be misinterpreted and implemented poorly to other people. In my personal journey of offering guidance, I try to stick by key principles to keep in mind. By sticking to these advice, I can make sure that the advice gets to the right people and helps them in a positive manner. And also let people know that if the advice is ambiguous, that they don't need to actually listen to them. Because at the end of the day, the advice doesn't necessarily need to be accepted by all. Offering this advice to others, people can understand the context in which you're providing advice to them. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about my background, my guide to providing advice, and my general thoughts. And before we start, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, share with your friends, hit that notification bell if you like this content. And here we go. I really like to help people, and this is the reason why I formed this YouTube channel in the first place. But with a platform like this, I have a lot of responsibilities to make sure that the advice that I give are appropriate for other people. This is both because I want the audience to come back for more advice and also to put a quality product out in the world. But just like giving advice out in real life to people, you have to make sure that the advice you give on the YouTube channel has to be of similar quality. Because things that you put out into the world, people are actually going to use them if they listen to your advice. And one of the best ways to approach giving people advice is to come from your personal experiences. These advice need to be things from your own personal truths and not fabrications of what you think should happen. And when I'm giving advice, I want to make sure that it is another option for them and not just a forced option that I think everyone should do. Because at the end of the day, people are different, and sometimes you have to tailor the advice to people of certain values. Not every advice that you give out can be universally applied. And over the long term, for people to use your advice, they have to commit to it. Because if they don't stick to your advice in the long term, then your advice might be ineffective. At the end of the day, there are a lot of things to keep in mind when you're trying to dispense advice to other people that you don't know. So here is my guide on giving advice. Number 1, be honest. Deliver advice with honesty all the time, even if it's hard to hear for the other party. Authenticity builds trust and credibility with you. Your advice must come from a truthful assessment of what's happening in your world. From personal relationships, career choices, and just understanding nuances, honesty is a very big tool and can give you a way to connect with others so that they'll actually take your advice and run with it. The biggest asset that we have is our trust and belief in one another. When you're honest with people all the time, they will come to believe you as very credible source of truth. And that means whatever advice you'll give, they will ultimately buy in much more. So you should always lead with what your honest assessment of your advice is, and never what you think is the right answer or what is the expected answer coming from you. I'm a big fan of telling people the honest truth in my day-to-day life. And that helps me to genuinely connect with other people and get to the root of the problems to be solved. That way, when I start to dispense out advice, they know that I'm coming from my honest self. If you're not honest and people catch you in a lie, then trust will be irrevocably broken. And they'll treat you with suspicion whenever you're trying to give advice to them. So when you're giving advice to others, don't lie. Be as honest as you possibly can to your true self. Number 2, share personal experiences. By recounting personal stories in the advice that we're giving to others, we can provide further insight and details and help bridge the gap from understanding why this is an advice that works for others. This not only provides valuable lessons, but empathy and personal connection to other people. Ultimately, we can tell better advice when it comes from our personal experiences because we can go into much more detail and provide people the context and background of why it works and how it worked in the first place. My videos are mainly based on my personal experiences and what I've learned throughout the journey of my life. And that all of my advice and experiences are from hard-learned lessons. This gives me the confidence and understanding that what I'm giving out to other people I know will work for at least a subset of people. And I can go deeper into the circumstances surrounding the advice that I give to others. When you share your personal experiences with other people, you're giving them direct advice that worked for you. No one can dispute the truth of your own personal experiences. People can take the lessons you learn and apply it to their life if it makes sense for them. This has been the primary way that others throughout history have learned from other people, through shared personal experiences. So when you're giving advice, the strongest tale is the tale crafted from your own personal experiences. Number 3, provide options. Presenting different options when you're trying to give advice is a great way to get more people on board with your advice. Because sometimes an advice might not work specifically for that person, but other alternatives might. It also helps people to realize that advice can't be generally given. There's always a case in which you have to provide more context for that advice you're giving. At the end of the day, people aren't you and they have different contexts and backgrounds. So it's really important that if you do have advice, try to give multiple points of view for that advice. Because providing a lot of options can also help a lot more people. In my Extreme Cheapskate series, I spend a lot of time giving people lots of options to save on money. And I also say that if it doesn't work for you, don't do it. Find a solution that works for you. Because only then can you sustain the advice that I'm giving out. Because one person's saving mechanism might not work for another person. If you only give one path for your advice, ultimately it's going to limit the amount of people you can help. So the more paths you have, the more people can use your suggestions or advice. So give people a lot of options when you're offering your advice. Number 4, tailor advice if possible. Sometimes you need to tailor your advice to unique and specific circumstances so that you avoid the one-size-fits-all advice for everyone. This is to limit generalizing your advice to people where it's so diluted that it doesn't help anyone. Adapting your advice to specific people and circumstances maximizes your ultimate message. And that advice can be very powerful for those specific people that have the exact context and background as you do. Many of the videos that I make are pretty specific in its topic because I can dig into the background and deep details of it. And the advice is tailored to a specific subset of people who like the personal growth and development message. Not everyone's gonna like my videos because sometimes it just doesn't apply to them. For example, my cheapskate videos might get more mass audiences than my personal development videos. But overall, I use these videos because I want to drill down into a topic and advice that I want to give out to others. Because there's a specific problem I have in my mind and I want to resolve it by putting it out there of what I think that advice should be. When we generalize our advice, we really don't end up helping anyone. This is because we can't actually solve the problem on an individual level because the circumstances are different. If you can't help that specific person, then helping the group does no good. So by tailoring your message, you could maximize the message to that one specific person. And you'll have a high likelihood of helping them out and they'll come back and listen for more advice from you. And number 5, don't push advice. Respecting people's autonomy and opinions are central when giving advice to other people. Because we have to ultimately step back and not impose our advice onto others if they're not willing to listen to it. We have to recognize that each person's journey is distinct in life and that advice just might not be applicable. And we have to emphasize the importance of offering people suggestions unpressured. People don't like to be pressured, and if you pressure them with advice, they're just not going to take it. By allowing people to have the space to make their own decisions and take your advice, your message will be better received. And you also foster mutual respect and connection when you go through that process. When I was younger and more headstrong, I wanted to logic people with my advice all the time. But as I later learned, people don't really respond to logic and reason if they don't want to hear it from you. It may make sense to you, but they're just not ready to hear it yet. When you're ready to tell them the advice, they have to also be ready to accept it. By doing this, you can give advice and have the maximum impact on them. That means you have to ultimately be patient to the person that you're giving the advice to. And sometimes people need to hear it a couple of times before it truly sinks in and they'll act on it. In my YouTube videos, this is incredibly easy. They can just turn me off when they don't want my advice. And when they're ready for my advice, they just click on that video. So when you're giving advice, don't be too pushy or preachy about it. Just give them some time and they'll come to you when they're ready to listen. So here are my general thoughts on giving advice to other people. As I've gotten older, I've given less advice overall to other people, especially in person. But when I do, it's more targeted and effective to that person as a result. This is because you start to realize that people will just do their own thing regardless of what you tell them. And if it's a battle that's not worth fighting, then you don't need to spend energy on it. Aside from my YouTube channel, I don't give out specific advice unless I'm asked for it. This is because I learned that ultimately not everyone is ready to hear what I have to say or even want to hear me. I think people in general want to learn from their own experiences rather than the stories and lessons from other people. Because these learned experiences can be more powerful than what they hear from others. So unless people really want to hear my advice, I don't really give it out these days. Also, be wary of giving out bad advice because it can happen accidentally from time to time. Sometimes people just have a different context, background, culture, or gender than you do, and your advice just might not work for them. And listening to your advice might be actively bad for them. When giving advice, try to tailor it for that person and list out specific assumptions you have, so that other people can understand the background and the context of the advice you're giving to them. So that was my guide on how to give advice to other people. There are a ton of people on the internet giving advice to people left and right. It can be a bit of the Wild West. And there's not many instructional videos on how to give good advice to others online. So when you're trying to give advice to other people, keep this guide in your mind so that you can maximize the message to others and have more of an impact to the people around you. So the main keys are to be honest, share personal experiences about yourself, and don't be pushy. With that in mind, you'll be optimized when you're giving advice to other people. So thank you for watching. Please leave a comment down below on what was the last piece of advice you gave other people, and did they take that advice or not? And I'll see you next time.